everyone. I'm putting myself in front of the camera once more. This is going to be an update video, and at this point in time I feel like my channel is almost entirely made up of update videos, because whenever I actually want to make a proper video, or a video that isn't actually an update, just about something random, I feel as if I have to preface it with an update first, because maybe you actually want to know what I've been up to, and perhaps I should address the elephant in the room. So that's what this video is going to be about. But to summarize where I'm at in a nutshell, you could say that the universe seems to be doing everything in its power to stop me from racing my bike. Let me just get myself comfortable, don't mind me. So let's wind the clock back to March the 3rd, when I left my home in Dunedin, New Zealand. You could say I was filled with motivation and optimism for the season ahead, because I finally felt as if I was going to be able to race normally, everything was going to go smoothly, well, as seamlessly as it can with cycling, because there's always things that are unpredictable, but I felt like luck might be on my side this time around, and I just wanted to finally showcase my potential again and just get some good performances on the board. That was my real aim. I just wanted to be able to race my bike and be proud of some of the performances that I was hoping to put out. So I arrived back into my apartment here in Girona, Spain, after 50 hours of travel, door to door. And as soon as I got here, I unpacked my bike, unpacked all my suitcases, got everything organised, and I went out for a ride. And this was at 5:30, and I really didn't want to do it. I was very unmotivated, but my coach said, oh, it'll be good for you. I went and did that, and I felt surprisingly good. If you know Girona, you'll know the climb that I went up, Els Angels, the most popular climb around, very close to town. Rode up there to the top, came back down, saw a lovely sunset, and all was well in my world. I felt surprisingly good, and it was actually nice to get out, and I did not regret doing that, even though I really didn't want to do it. The next day, Tuesday, I can't really remember what sort of ride it was, but it was a fairly unremarkable ride. I think I just did 90 minutes. I felt fine, all things considered, a little bit lethargic and tired from the travel, understandably, but nothing felt drastically wrong in my body. And then Wednesday, same sort of thing. In hindsight, I feel like maybe there were some subtle signs that things weren't quite right on Wednesday, but again, I was just able to brush those off as jet lag or put it down to the travel. So jet lag was basically masking whatever I was potentially harbouring at the time. And then Thursday, I went out riding, and I was supposed to do 3 hours and start introducing a little bit of intensity back into my training. So I had a variety of opening efforts to do, different durations and intensities. I think I started with 10 minutes tempo and 5 minutes FTP, and then a few 30-30 efforts and a couple of sprints, and that was over 3 hours. So it was nothing crazy, and at the start of the ride, I did notice that I felt a little bit chesty. There was just this sense that my breathing and my chest felt a bit rough and a bit raspy compared to normal, but it wasn't anything that I couldn't just brush to one side and ignore and just push on with training. On the whole, I felt pretty good, and I figured that doing these opening efforts would probably help to waken up the body and get me firing, which was a little bit naive of me, but oh well. That afternoon, once I returned from the ride, I was actually looking for a battery for my heart rate monitor and stumbled across a COVID test in my kitchen drawers. So for a bit of fun, I decided to get that out and do a COVID test, and lo and behold, it was positive. So that was a spanner in the works, and it probably explained why I didn't feel 100% normal 4 days on from the travel. Normally I'm quite a tough person, and the jet lag doesn't knock me about too much, but I didn't feel quite right, and it made sense to then test positive for COVID, because it made me realise, oh, it's not just the jet lag, there's something else going on in my system. And upon reflection of that week, I was having some weird side effects from the travel that probably indicated that there was COVID in my system for a while. I had a loss of appetite, scratchy throat, I was feeling unusually cold and just overall still quite tired 4 days on after the travel. Once I tested positive, the symptoms did become a little bit more noticeable over the coming days. I just had a couple of days rest and then I felt quite good come Sunday. So on Sunday I went out for a little ride because I was supposed to be racing Corsa on Wednesday. That was going to be my first race back in Europe. So I was really focusing on trying to brush this COVID off and get ready to go to Belgium. So on Sunday I did a COVID test because I was supposed to be flying out the next day, and I was very confident that the COVID test would be negative because in my eyes I had probably had COVID since I travelled over nearly a week ago at that point. So I thought, oh, maybe it's out of my system by now, but did a COVID test that Sunday and the line was still a very deep purple. So I was not going to be going anywhere. I would not be racing in Belgium on Wednesday or catching my flight the next day. For the entirety of this ride on Sunday, I noticed that my chest felt really tight and that it felt like there was a lot of pressure in there, but I just assumed that it would subside over the coming days. So that was a little bit deflating, but I cracked on with my training. Monday, tried to do another ride, same sort of sensations in my chest, but no stress. It'll probably go away at some point. And then Tuesday, same thing, wasn't feeling quite right in my chest, just very tight, pressurized feeling, and like I was only breathing from here upwards, and it just felt like my heart was just a clenched fist. And at that point in time, I went down to my local hospital, which is just down on the street and then a couple doors down. So I'm basically neighbours with the hospital, which is very convenient. So I went in there, and when you go into a hospital with chest pain, they tend to rush you on fairly quickly. So I was in and out within an hour. It was fantastic service, and they did a myriad of tests, and the doctor ultimately told me that it's just a symptom of COVID. You need to rest for another few days and we'll book you in to go and see a cardiologist. But my ECG was normal, well, normal for an athlete, and there weren't any immediate signs that something was seriously wrong. Aside from just this constant dull ache that I had in my chest, it was just this persistent ache, it never went away. That's why I went down to the hospital in the first place, because I thought it's not really normal if I just have this, oh, what's happening outside? This throb in your chest 24/7, lying in bed, lying on the couch, walking around. I could just feel it, so I knew that COVID had attacked my chest fairly hard. Well, that's how it felt anyway. So then I booked a cardiologist appointment for the next week, but up until that appointment I was to rest for another few days until I was able to see a cardiologist and get the all clear. And this felt like an eternity for me because I just missed my first race of the season, and I was really hoping to be able to instead do the upcoming races like Dwars-Vlaanderen and Flanders. They were coming up in a couple of weeks. Having to miss another few days of training just felt like the end of the world to me at that point in time, but little did I know that it really was not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, not how things have transpired now. There are lots of little details that I would like to share with you, so I'm just making sure I remember to tell you all of them. I went and saw a cardiologist who I've now since seen multiple times, Dr. Pujol. She's a fantastic lady. And also, as a side note, they seem to have so many cardiologists in, I don't know if it's just Catalonia, but in Girona, they have so many. It seems like every second doctor is also a cardiologist. Dr. Pujol, she did an ECG with me, another one, which looked okay aside from the normal athlete signs, just a very slow heart and something happening, but it was normal for people who exercise like me. And then she booked me in for an echocardiogram the week after, and at this point in time that echocardiogram seemed quite definitive and conclusive as to what my short to long term prognosis would be, because they did the echocardiogram to look for signs of pericarditis, because initially that's what they thought I had, which is inflammation of the sac that surrounds the heart rather than the heart itself. That's all I know about it, just that pure definition. So if you'd like to know more, then look up pericarditis, but I'm not going to spread misinformation on the internet. So that's all I'm going to tell you. But I got this echocardiogram done the next week, and there was no sign of fluid around my heart, within the sac of the heart, which is normally a telltale sign that you have quite a solid case of pericarditis. But the cardiologist did say to me that it's highly likely that the sac around your heart is instead just inflamed without producing fluid, and you'll need 2 weeks off completely resting to reduce that inflammation, and then after the 2 weeks then you can start to exercise again. So that's what I thought my prognosis was initially, just 2 weeks and then I'd be back into it. And although it wasn't ideal, it would not be the complete end of my season, and it would mean I could get back into racing fairly soon if everything went to plan. So I had this 2 weeks off, although I probably didn't take the rest as stringently as I should have, because I was still doing gym, I was still doing some core work, rock climbing as well, just some activities that didn't raise my heart rate much at all. But I think in hindsight, looking back, it was still too much for me and what was actually wrong. If I perhaps had a sports doctor or someone that I could talk to a bit more regularly rather than just going and visiting a cardiologist and getting a checkup every couple of weeks, then I might have been able to take this period a lot more cautiously. But I was still trying to do a little bit of exercise and move my body but keep my heart rate relatively low. But I still think even that was too much, unfortunately. But I don't think that changed the long-term prognosis at all. It didn't change what was actually wrong with me. It just meant that I wasn't starting to recover as soon as I could have been. At the end of the 2 weeks, I went out for a ride again and tried to start getting back into cycling and doing a bit more vigorous cardio activities, but still very low intensity, but just starting to raise my heart rate a little bit more. But as soon as I did that, the symptoms just came back almost straight away, and I realized that the 2 weeks hadn't really done anything, and I still did not feel right at all. I went back to the cardiologist again, and I was referred for a blood test and also a cardiac MRI. So I got the blood test done almost immediately, but I had to wait a week or so for the MRI, which I went down to Barcelona to do. And the blood test revealed that I had quite high levels of troponin, which I think is a chemical that your heart releases when there's been some damage to it or there's some inflammation, and mine was a lot higher than it should have been. That was an indication that something was definitely wrong. So then I went down to Barcelona and got the MRI, which showed there were signs indicative of myocarditis rather than pericarditis. So myocarditis is inflammation of the heart itself. The heart is a muscle rather than the sac that surrounds the heart. I'm not going to try and explain it any further because that's all I know. But I still had to wait 2 weeks to see my cardiologist again in Girona to look at the blood test, look at the MRI, and come up with a plan of attack and give me some guidelines that I would have to adhere to for the recovery. So finally, on March the 5th, I went and saw Dr. Pujol again, and she sentenced me to 3 months rest, complete rest, taking it very seriously this time, and a cocktail of drugs including colchicine and aspirin. Basically 2 months after I'd started experiencing these symptoms, I finally got a plan on how I could move forward and actually get healthy again and hopefully feel better and exercise normally again, although I'll be rather unfit when that time does roll around again, unfortunately. Okay, so I guess I can leapfrog up to this point in time now because there isn't really too much to share after I received my verdict on what's been happening with the old ticker. Today is June the 21st, and as I said, I had my appointment on May the 5th, so I'm nearly 2 months into this rest period, which has gone by quite fast. I have been able to keep myself busy with a few different things and been enjoying a variety of activities such as swimming, walking around town, driving a lot in Brno, exploring new places, trying out new cafes and bakeries. That's been a highlight of mine, and just working on a few different things and trying to get balls rolling in other areas of my life while my cycling is currently at a standstill, and exercise as a whole for that matter. Okay, so it's confession time. I will admit that I was a bit of a naughty girl and I probably overexerted myself. I did a couple of quite meaty walks, which were definitely above my current ability level. Not just my ability level, but just my level of health as a whole. And I certainly should not have done them because I really struggled and they were quite difficult. But you'll be pleased to know that I have been on the straight and narrow since then. I have really reined myself in, and I needed a bit of a reality check because I actually made my mum very anxious and very worried 18,000 kilometers away on the other side of the world. Just with what I was doing, I was being quite irresponsible with overexerting myself when I have a heart condition, and I wasn't listening to my body or doing what the experts had told me to do. Now it makes it sound like I was going out and running a marathon or riding my bike for 100 kilometers, and I wasn't doing that. I just did a couple of walks that were a bit too long and a bit too hilly, and I was quite exhausted from them. So I have learnt my lesson and will reinforce that I am on my best behaviour from this point onwards. No walks, no rock climbing, no nothing. I'm just taking it easy. You might see me walking around Girona, you might see me swimming in the ocean, out on the Costa Brava, but I'm doing nothing to stress my body or raise my heart rate. No exercise whatsoever. And that's how it's going to be for the next 6 weeks at least, because I need to be really sensible about this, and I will admit that I was stupid and I was doing things that were physically not advantageous. At this point in the video, I'm just going to read what I have written down because I guess I've outlined the timeline and everything that's happened, but I probably should also touch on my thoughts and emotions. I find that I can best get those out onto a page, so I have written them down here and I shall share a little bit with you. Throughout this whole period, from arriving in Europe on March the 5th or whenever it was until today, June the 21st, I haven't been able to do anything that I thought I was going to be able to do. I haven't been able to really ride my bike properly. As soon as I stepped foot in Europe, everything just went downhill for me. My entire season has been derailed, all because of COVID, and even a mild case of COVID that has decided to attack my heart for no good reason whatsoever. I was most upset initially because that's when I was stressing and trying to concentrate on still making it to these races, and I was worried about losing fitness because I was still trying to get to these races that were on the horizon, and I hadn't raced in so long. Well, I did nationals in February, but I hadn't raced for my team since May, and I just wanted so badly to be back doing a race with them, and it would have felt like the concussion chapter would have finally been closed, but instead I've just been dealt another huge blow with an entirely unexpected health condition that I did not see coming at all. So that's been really difficult to actually grapple with. I don't really like to think about it too much because the way everything has gone for me has just been really upsetting and devastating, and I think if I were to actually truly process it, then I would get rather upset. When I arrived back into New Zealand mid-December 2023, I was able to see some concussion specialists and basically get my cycling back on track, and I had such a smooth period of training and everything went so seamlessly, and my riding was very consistent, and I was doing everything that was expected of me, and I was able to follow the training set by my coach, and it just felt like finally I was starting to make some progress. And although I wasn't at top fitness when I boarded that plane to come to Europe, I was still feeling really good about the position that I was in and all the hard work that I'd put in during my time in New Zealand, and I felt as if it was only going to get better from this point on. And although the first races back, they might have been a little bit tough, I would still be able to just soak up the race load and slowly but surely be able to come into quite competitive form for the races that I was really looking forward to and the ones that would suit me the best. Once I realised that this issue was going to be a long-term thing, I somewhat accepted my fate and became a lot more relaxed about it, because I'd accepted that I wasn't going to be able to do the races that I initially came over to do, and no matter what happened, I would still have to put in some more hard yards before I was able to get on the start line again. Also, it's quite difficult to feel my body changing week after week, because I haven't been doing any exercise and I've been eating healthily, but it still doesn't really prevent the inevitable changes that you're going to experience when you haven't been doing exercise for a prolonged period of time, and you just start to feel a bit fluffier, you lose definition, you can't quite see the same shape in certain areas that you used to be able to, you just feel a bit softer as a whole. So that's been quite challenging to deal with, and probably the reason why I was trying to overexert myself. I guess you could say I was really stretching the guidelines of rest, and that was probably partially down to the fact that I just wanted to let off some steam and release some of the energy that I'd built up. But when exercise is an important way for you to feel good about yourself and it gives you a sense of satisfaction and contentment, then not having it in your life, not being able to do it, just really sucks. And I know it's only for 3 months, and in the grand scheme of things, that's not a long period of time at all, but still, in this moment, 3 months still feels like a very long time. And before this, the longest that I've really had to have off exercise has been maybe 5 weeks, and that's when I broke my hip socket and I was unable to weight bear for that period of time. So that's the longest that I've had up until this point. And even with my concussion, I still did not feel very good at all in my head, but I was able to actually run and cycle indoors, so I could still exercise, whereas this is the longest point in time that I have just not done any exercise whatsoever. So it's a very foreign concept for me, and one that I'm dealing with, but I know that there's just something missing in my life, and there's a hole that exercise really needs to fill. Okay, I'll put my notes down now. But to conclude, that's show business, isn't it? It can't be changed, and I just have to suck it up and deal with it as best as I can. Life always presents us challenges, and unfortunately for me and my cycling career, I feel like it has presented me with far more than I am deserving of. But that's enough of that. No need to feel sorry for myself or try and take pity on myself, because I'll be okay. It's just 3 months of no pain for 3 months of real heart gain. The only damage that's going to be made to my body is perhaps on my thighs and around here, but aside from that, I'm going to be a picture of health come the end of this 3 months. On a slightly related note, I might head off to the kitchen now and bake a brownie or maybe some cookies, but I'd just like to thank you for sticking around the channel up until this point in time. I know that this channel is inactive for the majority of the year, but thank you for being there when I do post a video, and hopefully there'll be one coming in the near future. But perhaps, as well as baking the brownie, I should actually get around to editing these clips this afternoon. Otherwise, it may not get done, or it will get done, but this video will be out in 6 months or so. But okay, bye. That's all from me. I'll see you whenever there's a next